Hello, I'm Doug Musio. This is the first of a two-part conversation on the Middle East. Within the last 2 weeks, a lot of bad news has been coming out of the Middle East. The headlines say it all. Time magazine, Yemen, Al-Qaeda's new staging ground, the New York Times, Afghanistan postpones elections for parliament. Again, the New York Times, cables detail envoys' worry on Karzai's role, and also front page photograph of a bombing in Baghdad. Things do not look good. Joining me once again to talk about the Middle East, its problems and prospects, and U.S. policy in the region is a distinguished Middle East hand, Richard Murphy, former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Syria, Mauritania, and the Philippines. He has served as Undersecretary of State for Near Eastern and Asian Affairs, and he has been named Career Ambassador. He has been a senior fellow for the Middle East at the Council on Foreign Relations, and Ambassador Murphy is a TV commentator and widely consulted expert. We're going to do what no American administration has yet managed to do: connect all the dots. Welcome back, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.
Okay. Last time we talked was before the presidential election in September 2008, and there were some hopeful signs. Syria was breaking out of its isolation. Lebanon formed a new government. Israel made deals with Hamas and Hezbollah. There were U.S.-Iran contacts. Now, after reading the headlines and reading the stories, looks like a different world. Your overall impression of the region?
Well, things change very, very slowly, and the election of an American president doesn't change the world. Our guys, when they come to office, be it the president himself or a new administration that comes into the bureaucracy, has a tendency to think history's going to start on my day one. It never does.
Okay. Christmas, bomber. Really discouraging. I mean, one person with something in his crotch has literally terrorized the world. Massive changes in airline security, significant reviews of intelligence procedures, huge response for a small act. What's the source of this hatred? Why are people intent on killing us?
Well, there's many theories on this, Doug, but for me it starts maybe the power imbalance, call it. We are so big, so strong, and we are everywhere. We involve ourselves or get sucked into problems worldwide. So that can excite some admiration, but some envy and some anger. Depends which side sees us as being helpful or hurtful to their cause.
Isn't it true, though, that it's hard to convince folks in that region that U.S. is not anti-Islam?
It's almost impossible to convince those who have their doubts about us, who start out convinced that we are trying to take them over either politically or culturally, economically, whatever. When they look at where we put our armed might in Iraq, in Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, this just tells them that's a long list of Muslim countries. And what are the Americans trying to do and trick us into thinking they're not anti-Islam? This gives our opponents, who are very nimble in their propaganda, as President Obama has said himself, they are nimble adversaries. And it doesn't take that much to pick up one lost stray out of Nigeria, of well-to-do background, etc., but feeling lost, to feel that, gee, he might play a big role in defending his faith. That's the way it's worked, and it's 2 million passengers a day taking their shoes off in our airports.
Oh, please. And now we're going to have full body scans.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, Obama in Cairo really said wonderful things, but as you've noted, when you look at around the neighborhood, not much has changed, and the expectations were really so high that it was almost doomed to failure in one sense.
I think that's fair. Looking at it from the region looking over to the U.S., every time there is a change in an American administration, there is the expectation of a significant shift one way or another. What he has done to some significance, I submit, is take Iran, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in more detail later.
Sure.
But he has, as one analyst said, stolen their enemy from the Iranian leadership. It's very hard to make a devil out of Barack Hussein Obama.
Well, it
And
was
this
easy to do it to George Bush, for example.
Well, it was, and he played up to that, saying,
Right.
Take me on. I'm ready to go and get you.
Let's look at Obama. Just about a little bit more than a year, a week more than a year. What's your overall assessment? He wins the Nobel Peace Prize. What does that mean? Just generally, your overall assessment of Obama's year.
Well, the Nobel Peace Prize, I think, is pretty simply explained as an expression of hope that what he came into office standing for, U.S. engagement with the world, not holding back and waiting, establishing, setting preconditions on who we would talk to, who we would not talk to. Welcome back to the world, America, was, and I think the Norwegian message was, for God's sakes, keep that going. And this award is an incentive, should be an incentive to you.
But how much has U.S. policy really changed? I mean, you've noted that it's somewhat surprisingly has followed Bush's second term. Is it that much different? What is the relationship between continuity and change here?
Well, the old saying, old at least 50 years old, after the Second World War was that politics stops at the water's edge. I think you heard that from Senator Vandenberg
Sure.
and the others in the immediate post-World War II period. Well, it's a little hard to appreciate, but how, in many ways, despite the very different rhetoric and appearance, the reality of policy formation in some of these critical areas, in the Middle East in particular, hasn't changed. We're still seeking a way to help secure Israeli security. We have one idea, they have another, but the goal has been constant for decades. In the case of Iraq, near the end of his administration, really the last days of his administration, President Bush's representatives reached an agreement with the Iraqi government on the status of forces.
Right.
We will have our combat troops out by the end of 2011. And that policy was set and really welcomed by Obama's team. So that's going ahead. What we do on the Arab-Israeli peace process, again, it's a complicated question, but the same goal remains. How do we give a sense of a just solution to the Palestinians and a sense of security to the Israelis, put them together and get to peace agreements?
Okay, before we get into the specific arenas of conflict, Obama talked in the campaign about engagement, and that basically talking to your enemies and talking to states that have profound differences. And he said it in the CNN YouTube debate in 2007 rather, when he was asked would he, without preconditions, talk to leaders with which Americans had hostile relations. And he said, I would, and he said it was a disgrace that President Bush hadn't. Overall, has this process of engagement, talking to one's enemies, has it borne fruit, either in a practical political sense or a more ethereal contextual sense, if you will?
Well, I might quibble with you over ethereal. He has set a new context, or reaffirmed a context which was characteristic of the Americans. We're not afraid of talking to anybody. And that has unsettled some very set opinions in countries like Iran. As I said, we stole their enemy by the president's mere posture on that. But they quickly said, okay, show us some action. Nice words. Now what? And things haven't moved very far. Well, on that case, again, we'll come to Iran as a detailed issue, but that's been the growing reaction. So what's new? Nice positions, nice rhetoric, yes, peace, security, all that, but what are you really going to do about it? And the fact is, these problems that he has inherited from, which have been decades in developing and getting more and more complex, don't have easy solutions, and they're not solved by a speech.
So it seems as if his foreign policy really can be assessed in two dimensions. One are his goals and I guess the decision-making process, and the second is the policies and their implementation. And it seems to me that on the first, engagement has been a success, but on the second, it's certainly almost at best an incomplete grade.
Sure. No silver bullets, no magic bullets, no quick solutions out there. What he's done, though, and here the rhetoric I think was very important in reminding the region and reminding the American public when he said about, for instance, the Arab-Israeli confrontation, that conflict going on.
Let's turn to that right now
decades.
Specifically.
It is an American vital interest that there be peace between the Arabs and Israeli. It's in American national interest that I am going to be working. It is not just in the interest of an Israeli or a Palestinian Arab point of view. It's in our national interest. That's a useful reminder, I think, to all parties.
Zbigniew Brzezinski in the latest Foreign Affairs has got a piece entitled "Let Obama Be Obama," and talking specifically about the Israeli, what he calls the Israeli-Palestinian conundrum. I want to quote and then get your reaction to it. He says, "It is not fashionable to say this, but it is demonstrably true that, deservedly or not, much of the current hostility toward the United States in the Middle East and the Islamic world as a whole has been generated by the bloodshed and suffering produced by this prolonged conflict," meaning the Arab-Israeli conflict. Is this true? Is this right?
Well, let me say simply, it's a view that I share. I have no hesitation to calling the unsolved Israeli-Palestinian confrontation the root problem in the area. And it has allowed characters such as Osama bin Laden to say that the total United States support for the Israeli positions makes the United States an enemy of us all. And in varying degrees, other leaders in the area have played with that theme. So, yeah, it's not an easy job for us to work on, but the fact is that it is seen out in the area as the root problem. Now, there are those in this country, there are certainly those in Israel, not all by any means, but who feel Israel is being singled out unfairly when we talk of a root problem of Israeli-Palestinian. They, of course, put a lot of weight for and responsibility for the lack of progress on the Palestinian side, but they're very quick to resent any criticism of Israeli policy, Israeli strategy. It's all dedicated to self-defense, to security, and that has a lot of resonance in American politics, in American ears generally, that Israel is under constant existential threats. The question is, what are they doing about it, and are they getting closer to a secure state by their policies, or are we seeing an increasingly brutal policy creating an increasingly suicidal reaction on the Palestinian side. That's not getting either side closer to a security situation they want.
What alternatives do the Israeli have? I mean, basically their attitude seems to be they've crushed the bad and in a sense ignored the good, if you will.
That's fine, but they haven't crushed the bad. If you want to join in the analysis, there are good and bad Palestinians. If Hamas is bad, Hamas has benefited from the siege of Gaza, the campaign of a year and several weeks ago when it started, to crush Hamas. It has been sealed off, Gaza that is, has been sealed off for more than a year now, and the suffering on the popular level has been major. But Hamas is still in charge, and Hamas is still able and nimble enough and clever enough in intra-Palestinian politics to be a factor we have to reckon with.
What ought the Israelis and what ought Hamas and Fatah do to diminish the hostilities and come to some kind of peace agreement, which we'll come to in a bit?
Well, go back to your formula. You said or described the Israelis as favoring the good and crushing the bad, or what were the words? They haven't favored the good. If you take the Palestinian Authority as good, they haven't begun to pump up the position of the leader of Fatah, who is the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. If they're going to put down Hamas, then logically they should be giving an extra hand to Fatah to increase their popularity, and it just hasn't happened.
In part, is this a result of domestic politics, if we can divorce foreign policy from domestic politics?
Our domestic politics?
No,
or
the Israelis.
Israeli domestic politics.
Let me be more specific. What does the election of Netanyahu mean for the region and the prospects of peace between Israel and the Palestinians, or a movement toward this?
Well, I think he had persuaded the Israeli public, or enough of them, it's a very fractured political scene there, that he stood for security, and that Israeli security trumped all other considerations, and you can trust me to deliver. I think that message is basic. And what I see, this is very personal maybe, but I see an Israeli public which basically has, if not given up on the Palestinians as possible partners, isn't taking them very seriously, has erected its barriers, its big high wall running across dividing much of the of Israel proper from the West Bank, and they're comfortable. They may not be happy, but they're looking to their status as a high-tech economy, sought after by research firms around the world, markets in Europe, in the United States, and they're just sort of turning their back on the region.
What about Hamas and Fatah? What have they done to facilitate this? Is it in their incentive to have a diminishing of hostilities with Israel, or is it in their interest to have this because it gives them a raison d'etre? I mean, a reason to be.
That's a fair question. I think that Fatah and Mahmoud Abbas personally, with the former Israeli Prime Minister, at least says they got very close to an agreement. Ehud Olmert was out of office, replaced by Netanyahu, and that those words of praise haven't been repeated by the Palestinian leadership in the Palestinian Authority ever since. They feel they've gotten nowhere with the Netanyahu government. Is it in the interest of Hamas to puff themselves up as the enemy that is ready to advocate violence? Because that's the only time the Israelis will listen. That's the only time the world will listen, that we have a cause. We're not just a broken people ready to accept anything from the hands of Israel, we're going to resist. Now, their resistance is pretty puny, even pathetic, and you wonder why they indulged in that when you see the Israeli retaliation in Gaza a year ago, when you saw the Israeli retaliation against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And to be fair, the Israeli exertion of power has brought a measure of quiet and stability to the Lebanese front and to Israel proper vis-a-vis the Palestinians.
The settlements are a flashpoint. Obama raised the issue of the settlements in the spring of 2009 and then backed off. Clinton talked about the unprecedented, she used the term unprecedented in terms of Israeli actions vis-a-vis the settlers. Was it a tactical mistake to insist on the settlement issue being settled as a precondition for the negotiations towards this two-state solution?
I'm afraid it was a tactical mistake. Senator Mitchell is out in the area steadily, has been out there steadily these last several months, and is trying to get people to particularly on the Palestinian side, to accept less than a total freeze on settlements. And tactical mistake in this sense that no Israeli government has ever seriously tackled the issue of settlements. Some have praised them or damned them with faint praise, if you will, but they've never been willing politically to take the settlers on. And the settlers basically act like a laser in Israeli politics. They don't care who's in charge. They know what they want, and they will work steadily to get it. And there have been some Israeli analysts who've written very interesting pieces about the decline of the left, of the peace camp, as it was called in Israel, that they've given, they never took seriously the chance of peace that was in their hands when they had that brilliant victory in 1967.
Right.
That was again in their hands just after Oslo in the early 90s. They didn't take it because it would have meant confronting the settlers and saying, we agree on the lines of 1967. There will be a Palestinian state on one side and our state on the other.
Okay, so it seems from reading this material that the two-state solution is beginning to lose some of its credibility. If no two-state, then what?
A state of wishful thinking.
Is there any?
I just don't. We don't see. I think anybody that's worked on the problem has come to think of two states as the only solution. That the Palestinians will want to exert sovereign power, and the Israelis will not give full rights of citizenship to the existing population and the ever-growing Palestinian population.
So what's the best that we can expect, and what is a realistic expectation?
Well, Senator Mitchell reminded everybody about behind his great success in dealing with Irish politics was that he had 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. It's going to take a lot of patience, dripping water on the stone, offering, have you really thought about this angle, that angle? Don't you think you could reconsider this aspect? And it's not going to be dramatic. He's not going to suddenly produce the parameters or lay down an American peace plan. I think we gave up on that idea. Obama might have done that last September at the General Assembly. He did not do it. So clearly he's followed the line that this is something that's got to be generated between the parties themselves. And that's what Mitchell is out there trying to do.
Before we talk about Iraq and Iran and the rest of the region in the next show, let me just conclude this discussion with a question about Secretary of State Clinton. She's been Secretary of State now for a year. What is the view of the world of her and her impact on policy? And also, since you're an old State Department hand, how What is her relationship with the people at state?
Well, start for the last. My understanding is it's a very good relationship. There's a lot of respect for her. And in the immediate region that I've worked on, thought about over the years, you could say that direct authority has been delegated to representatives such as Senator Mitchell, such as Richard Holbrooke, in dealing with Afghanistan, Pakistan. But I get no sense that either one is trying end runs around her as Secretary of State to the White House, and the team appears very cohesive, very, very coherent. So that's the best possible arrangement, because if you start seeing tensions between the Secretary of the National Security Council and the White House, you've got problems.
This has been part one of my conversation with Ambassador Richard Murphy. Next week, we'll continue our tour of the Middle East. Join us. Hello, I'm Doug Musio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.tv. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.